Most people think life-changing decisions arrive with warning signs, alarms, dramatic moments, or at least a clear sense that something big is about to happen. But that's not how it usually works. The decisions that shape your life the most often come quietly. They don't announce themselves. They don't look dangerous or powerful in the moment. They look small, ordinary, even harmless. And that's exactly why they matter so much. Because when something feels small, you don't treat it with the seriousness it deserves. You don't pause long enough. You don't question it deeply. You just move forward. And sometimes, that one step becomes a direction you never meant to take. Think about how many times you've said, "It's just this once," or "It won't make a difference." That sentence has been the starting point of countless stories, some of success, many of regret. Because the truth is, life rarely changes overnight. It shifts gradually, decision by decision, moment by moment, until one day you look around and realize you are somewhere you never intended to be. And when you trace your steps back, it wasn't one giant mistake. It was a series of small choices that felt insignificant at the time. The most dangerous decisions are not the ones that scare you. It's the ones that feel comfortable, the ones that align with your habits, your emotions, your current state of mind. When you're tired, you choose what's easy. When you're emotional, you choose what feels good. When you're uncertain, you choose what feels safe. But easy, good, and safe don't always lead to growth, and they definitely don't always lead to the life you actually want. There's a quiet battle happening in every decision you make. It's a battle between who you are right now and who you could become. And most of the time, the version of you that wins is the one you feed the most. If you constantly choose comfort, you strengthen the part of you that avoids challenge. If you consistently choose discipline, you strengthen the part of you that grows. It's not about one decision in isolation. It's about the pattern those decisions create. You don't wake up one day disciplined. You don't suddenly become successful, healthy, or fulfilled out of nowhere. You become those things because of the decisions you make when no one is watching. The ones that don't get applause. The ones that don't feel exciting. The ones that feel repetitive, even boring. That's where your future is built. Not in big moments, but in small, consistent actions that compound over time. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Every decision carries a cost, even the good ones. When you choose one path, you are automatically rejecting another. When you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. And most people don't like thinking about that. They want to believe they can have everything at once. They want to delay decisions, avoid commitment, keep all options open. But indecision is a decision, and it often leads to outcomes just as powerful as the choices you actively make. There are people right now living lives they never wanted, not because they made one terrible decision, but because they avoided making important ones. They waited. They hesitated. They told themselves they'd figure it out later, and later turned into years. Then those years turned into a life they don't recognize. That's the hidden danger of not deciding. You drift, and drifting rarely takes you somewhere meaningful. On the other side, there are people who made one intentional decision at the right time, and everything changed. Not because that decision was magical, but because it shifted their direction. It changed their habits. It altered their environment. It forced them to grow in ways they never would have otherwise. That's the power of a single choice. It can redirect your entire life, not instantly, but inevitably. You have to understand that your environment plays a bigger role in your decisions than you think. The people around you, the content you consume, the habits you've built, they all influence what feels normal to you. And what feels normal often becomes what you choose. If you surround yourself with negativity, poor discipline, and low standards, your decisions will start reflecting that. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. You adapt. You absorb. You become what you're exposed to. That's why one of the most powerful decisions you can make is choosing your environment. It doesn't always mean physically moving somewhere else. Sometimes it means changing who you listen to, changing what you watch, changing what you tolerate. Because what you tolerate eventually becomes what you accept, and what you accept shapes your life. There's also the role of fear in decision-making. Fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It tells you to wait, to be careful, to not take risks. And sometimes that's valid. But other times, it's just holding you back. The problem is, fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It sounds like doubt. It sounds like overthinking. It sounds like maybe later. And if you're not aware of it, you start making decisions based on avoiding discomfort instead of pursuing growth. The irony is, the decisions that feel the most uncomfortable in the moment are often the ones that lead to the greatest growth. Saying no when it's easier to say yes. Starting something when you feel unprepared. Walking away from something familiar because you know it's not right. These decisions don't feel good at first. They feel uncertain, even painful, but they align you with a better version of yourself. And then there's the other side, the decisions that feel good immediately but carry long-term consequences. Procrastination feels good in the moment. So does avoiding responsibility. So does choosing distraction over focus. But those decisions slowly build a life of missed opportunities, unfulfilled potential, and quiet regret. Not dramatic regret, but the kind that sits with you in silence and asks, what if you had chosen differently? You don't need to be perfect in your decisions. No one is. But you do need to be aware. Because awareness changes everything. When you start recognizing the weight of your choices, you begin to pause. You begin to question. You begin to act with intention instead of impulse. And that shift alone can change the trajectory of your life. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are one decision away from a different path. It might be a decision about your health, your career, your relationships, or even your mindset. It might be something you've been avoiding, something you've been putting off, something you've been telling yourself you'll deal with later. But later is not guaranteed. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. There's a moment in every person's life where they are faced with a choice that doesn't look extraordinary, but carries extraordinary weight. And in that moment, you don't always know what the right decision is, but you do know what aligns with your values. You do know what moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck. The question is whether you're willing to choose it, even when it's uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, your life is not the result of luck, chance, or fate alone. It's the result of decisions, your decisions. Some conscious, some unconscious, some intentional, some reactive, but all of them shaping who you become and where you end up. And once you understand that, you start to see your life differently. You start to realize that you're not as powerless as you thought, that you have more control than you've been using. And that's where everything begins to change. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in a quiet shift. A decision to think differently, to act differently, to choose differently. It might not look like much in the moment. It might not feel like a turning point, but give it time. Because the right decision, made at the right moment, has the power to either save your life or slowly destroy it, depending on which direction you choose to go. And the truth most people don't want to face is this. By the time the consequences of a decision become visible, it's often too late to undo them completely. You can adjust, you can recover, you can rebuild, but you cannot erase. Every decision leaves a mark. Some are small, barely noticeable. Others change the entire course of your life in ways you never imagined. And what makes it even more complex is that in the moment of choosing, you rarely have full clarity. You're deciding with limited information, influenced by emotions, pressure, and the environment around you. That's why intentional living is not about always being right. It's about being conscious. It's about recognizing that even when you don't have all the answers, you still have the responsibility to choose carefully. Because careless decisions don't just affect the present, they echo into the future. They shape your habits, your identity, and ultimately your destiny. And whether you accept it or not, every choice you make is casting a vote for the person you are becoming. There's a pattern you'll notice if you look closely at people who are truly fulfilled, not just successful on the surface, but grounded, disciplined, and at peace. They don't leave their decisions up to chance. They don't rely on motivation alone. They build systems. They create standards. They decide in advance who they are and what they stand for. So when the moment of choice arrives, they are not starting from zero. They are simply acting in alignment with a version of themselves they have already defined. Most people do the opposite. They wait until the moment comes, then rely on how they feel. And feelings are unstable. They change based on your mood, your energy, your circumstances. If you base your decisions only on feelings, your life will become inconsistent. One day you'll be disciplined, the next day you won't. One day you'll be focused, the next day distracted. And over time, that inconsistency creates a gap between where you are and where you want to be. So the real power lies in deciding before the decision. It sounds simple, but it's transformative. It means setting rules for yourself, non-negotiables, boundaries, standards that don't change depending on how convenient they are. When you decide in advance that you don't tolerate certain behaviors from yourself, you remove the internal debate. You don't waste time negotiating with temptation. You act with clarity. But here's where it gets real. Clarity often comes with sacrifice. You cannot build a focused life without saying no to distractions. You cannot build strong relationships without letting go of toxic ones. You cannot become disciplined without giving up certain comforts. Every meaningful decision will cost you something: time, energy, convenience, sometimes even people. And that's where many hesitate, not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't want to pay the price. The problem is, avoiding the price doesn't mean you avoid the cost. It just means you pay a different one later, a heavier one. Regret is expensive. Lost time is expensive. Missed opportunities are expensive. And unlike money, you can't earn those things back the same way. That's why the decision you're avoiding right now might be more important than you think. Not because it guarantees success, but because not making it guarantees stagnation. There's also the reality that some decisions will test your identity. They will force you to confront who you really are, not who you pretend to be. It's easy to say you value discipline, honesty, or growth when everything is going well. It's much harder to act on those values when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or when no one is watching. That's where your true character is revealed, not in what you say, but in what you consistently choose. And consistency is built through repetition. One good decision won't change your life, but repeating that decision daily will. Just like one bad decision won't destroy your life, but repeating it over time can. That's the hidden power of patterns. They turn actions into habits, and habits into identity. Eventually, you don't just make disciplined choices, you become a disciplined person. Or the opposite, if your patterns lead you there. You also have to accept that not every decision will feel certain. In fact, many of the most important ones won't. You might doubt yourself. You might question if you're making the right move. That's normal. Certainty is a luxury you rarely have in real life. What matters more is alignment. Does this decision move you closer to the person you want to become or further away? That question alone can guide you through a lot of uncertainty. Another thing people underestimate is how quickly small decisions compound. It's easy to ignore something that seems minor today, skipping one workout, delaying one task, ignoring one red flag. But when those small actions stack up, they create momentum. And momentum is powerful. It can work for you or against you. Positive momentum builds confidence, discipline, and progress. Negative momentum builds doubt, procrastination, and regret. At some point, momentum becomes your default. You either find yourself moving forward almost automatically or stuck in patterns that feel hard to break. And that's why the earlier you become aware of your decisions, the more control you have. Because it's much easier to change direction early than it is to reverse years of habits later. There's also a deeper layer to all of this: self-trust. Every time you make a decision and follow through, you build trust with yourself. You prove that your words have weight, that your intentions mean something, and that trust becomes the foundation of confidence. Not the loud, external kind, but the quiet certainty that you can rely on yourself. On the other hand, every time you break your own commitments, you weaken that trust. You start doubting yourself. You hesitate more. You second-guess your decisions. And over time, that internal doubt becomes one of the biggest obstacles you face. Not because you lack ability, but because you no longer believe in your own consistency. So when you think about a decision, don't just think about the immediate outcome. Think about what it's reinforcing. Is it strengthening your discipline or weakening it? Is it building self-trust or eroding it? Is it moving you forward or keeping you stuck? These are the deeper consequences that most people overlook. And then there's the reality that sometimes the hardest decision is not choosing between right and wrong, but between good and better, between something that's comfortable and something that challenges you, between staying where you are and stepping into the unknown. Those decisions require a different kind of courage, not the kind that reacts to danger, but the kind that embraces uncertainty. Because growth always lives on the other side of uncertainty. And the longer you avoid it, the more your world shrinks. You start playing safe. You lower your expectations. You convince yourself that this is enough. Not because it truly is, but because it feels easier than risking failure. But playing safe has its own risk, the risk of never reaching your potential. At the same time, it's important to understand that not every bold decision is a smart one. Recklessness is not courage. Acting without thinking is not strength. The goal is not to chase risk blindly, but to take calculated steps toward growth, to balance courage with awareness, to move forward with intention, not impulse. And as you move through life, you'll notice something interesting. The decisions that once felt difficult start to become easier, not because they change, but because you do. You build resilience. You gain clarity. You understand yourself better. And that growth allows you to navigate future decisions with more confidence and less fear. But none of that happens without action. You can think, analyze, and plan all you want, but at some point, you have to choose. You have to move. Because staying in the same place is also a decision, and rarely the one that leads to a better life. Right now, there is likely a decision in front of you, something you've been thinking about, maybe even avoiding. It might not seem dramatic. It might not feel urgent, but it matters more than you realize. Because it's not just about that one moment. It's about the direction it sets. You don't need perfect clarity. You don't need absolute certainty. What you need is honesty. The kind that allows you to admit what you already know deep down. The kind that pushes you to act, even when it's uncomfortable. Because comfort is not always your friend. Sometimes, it's the very thing holding you back. In the end, your life will not be defined by what you intended to do, or what you planned to do, or what you hoped to do. It will be defined by what you actually chose to do. The actions you took, the paths you followed, the decisions you made when it mattered. And that's why this is not just about one decision. It's about understanding that every decision carries weight. Every choice matters. Every moment is an opportunity to move closer to the life you want or further away from it. So when the next decision comes, and it will, don't rush past it. Don't ignore it. Don't treat it like it doesn't matter. Because it does. More than you think. It might not change everything instantly, but it will start something. A direction, a pattern, a path. And once you step onto that path, you'll realize something powerful. That your life was never just happening to you. It was being shaped by you, one decision at a time.